Hi, I'm Kate,
And I'm Tony, and
and
this
this
is
is
Sip and
Sippin'
Stim.
Stim.
Pour a cup, take a break, settle down, and join us on a whim. Gentle thoughts, honest talks, it's time for a sip and stim.
Today, we're talking about how to get started and where to get started. Many parents have no idea where to begin. They might feel lost, they're overwhelmed. There's so much information, but to know what to start first, where to go. And we just want to kind of help navigate that path. It's definitely not necessarily a linear progression here. So we're going to go into some of those contacts that you can make and those first steps that you can make when you are anticipating your child may have an autism diagnosis.
And we'll also tie in my personal story with Grayson and how he first showed signs and how other people saw signs before I did, and where we went from our little 9, 10-month-old child to having a diagnosis by age 13 months. I do apologize in advance. I am a little sick today, so I sound a little muffled and stuffy. But when you have two kids in elementary school, unfortunately, this is how life goes. So on we
Hey,
go.
welcome to the party. I'm going to be coughing as well, and I'm a little congested here, so tis the
Yeah,
season.
yes, yeah, it definitely is. So Tony, I don't know if you would like to start from your point of view, at least as a clinician, when you begin when you first see like a client in your profession, what do you look for when you see a brand new kiddo?
Yeah, so in the ABA industry, when it comes to services funded through insurance, really the thing that we need to see to be able to even begin considering ABA services is that that child has an autism diagnosis. And we often get calls where parents are just, they're trying to do their best to support their child and they have a suspicion that, maybe their child might have autism. And um, we have a lot of contacts for resources in our area. So where I service is primarily Maryland location. Um, and there's many large hospitals around. You have Kennedy Krieger and Mount Washington and Johns Hopkins and all kinds of locations that specialize in autism and other related disorders. And we'll refer them to go to those providers to get their diagnosis. The downfall is that the wait list is always long. So I find that a lot of these families, every step of the way, it's okay, let's hurry up to wait, let's hurry up to wait. So what I've been recently recommending is when I find a LCPC or a psychologist or a diagnostician of some sort that's able to diagnose their child either private pay or they might not be associated with a big named hospital. Maybe their wait list is a lot shorter. I will try to recommend that path. Sadly, a lot of families don't have the funding to do that if it is only private pay, but I look for alternatives because sometimes you just need that diagnosis, an authentic diagnosis. But sometimes you just know, and to get that diagnosis can really be life-changing in a positive way to get the services your child needs.
And is there a certain age frame that they begin, at least with your company?
So with our company, we will service anyone that has a diagnosis and their insurance provider offers to fund the ABA services. So it's really for where I particularly work now, and actually other locations as well that are insurance based. It's really been up to the funder. If the funder's willing to fund the services, and as long as that child was within our scope of competencies, as long as we're able to safely support them with their behavior reduction and their needs, we will service anyone, basically. I've been seeing children as young as 18 months being diagnosed recently, which has not been, sorry, has not been the trend. Wasn't the trend like a few years ago, but more recently you're seeing younger and younger children get diagnoses.
Yeah. And I definitely think that that is because more and more parents are becoming aware, and they are often being referred to programs like early intervention and their local intermediate units for evaluations and things like that from their pediatricians. Um, so in our case, for example, our pediatrician had noticed that Grayson actually had he was born with a large birthmark on his face. It's called a port wine stain. And the condition that is usually associated with the port wine stain on his face is called Sturge-Weber syndrome. And there were a bunch of other different symptoms that went along with the Sturge-Weber syndrome that Grayson did have. He just did not have the kind of like the bullseye symptoms. And so we were actually referred down to Hopkins and Kennedy Krieger to have him evaluated for Sturge-Weber syndrome. And we actually did not even know about that until we were referred to a neurologist. And we weren't referred to a neurologist until we saw EI, early intervention, through our local county. The reason why we were referred was because during his early intervention evaluation, Grayson had been staring off into space a lot. And he would play with something, but then he would stop and pause and would just kind of stare, not really react to anybody. And it ended up being that he was having absence seizures. This is actually, I feel like it's fairly common when I hear parents say that they are experiencing a fresh diagnosis and their child also is having seizure activity, that they didn't even notice anything at first. And usually it's someone else who notices the seizure activity before they do. So that was definitely where we were at as well. I knew that absence seizures were like a thing, but I didn't know much about like neurology or anything like that before we kind of had to learn. And so early intervention is probably the best place to start if I think your pediatrician, or even if a parent has any sort of gut feeling or concern about their child not hitting the milestones. And I know that the CDC has recently changed those milestones, or like the
Yeah.
whatever the milestone markers are, or whatnot. I actually have my younger sister has a baby that just turned 1, and some of the milestones that he has hit, I think he's advanced, but she's like, yeah, no, he's kind of behind. And I'm shocked because I look at 10 years ago where my kids were at that age, and it doesn't it just does not compare at all. Like he seems so advanced compared to my kids. Um, so just looking at how things have changed, especially over the past 10 years, um, that definitely, it kind of blows my mind. But I do think that early intervention is probably the best place to begin.
Yes.
And I think that every county should have one, or at least an intermediate unit that would be able to get a family started. And the nice thing is that that's funded through taxpayer dollars and through the state. So most times, I mean, majority, if not all of the time, the parents won't see a cost come out of their pocket.
Yeah, I definitely think it's important, A, the early intervention is all kind of evidence shows us the positive impacts of that early on intervention. B, getting involved in the public programs, the publicly funded programs within the districts is very, very important. There's a lot of resources that you'll find that later on in the child's future really link back to that. Um, all you're gaining a lot of data, a lot of information from the child's progress, the child's needs, child's regressions, po negative and positive, and that early intervention. In Maryland, we call it infants and toddlers. I'm not sure what it's called exactly in Pennsylvania, even though I live there, oddly enough. Um, I was speaking to my cousin, and she's in Florida, and she has two different programs in her state and district where they actually service children that are 1 to 2, and then children that are like 2.5 to right before they enter into preschool or kindergarten. So theirs is kind of broken up in two different
Mhm.
sections. Um, but it's definitely the first place you want to go. You'll be able to get services for occupational therapy and speech therapy and physical therapy, and you'll get a really nice, hopefully you'll get a really nice evaluation, psychological evaluation that will really give you a nice full picture of where your child falls.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Pennsylvania, we do it's early intervention, which is ages birth to 3. And then once they hit 3 until they go to kindergarten, that's it's the intermediate unit. It's like their preschool program. And they offer like the PT, OT speech. And then they also offer something called special instruction. And in our situation, Grayson actually qualified for all of those services. And Roslyn, she qualified for speech and OT. So we did take advantage of those services. I think every parent, even if you think your child is remotely delayed in one or more of the CDC guidelines, I mean, I really think that it doesn't hurt to just have your child
Sure.
evaluated. I mean, if you can get them help, the sooner, the better. And I am a firm believer that even in Rosalind's situation, with her being so high functioning on the spectrum, she has developed such a vocabulary. Um, I do believe that getting her the speech therapy early has really helped her vocabulary kind of just explode. I mean, she was speaking full coherent sentences by like 3 that like my niece, who is a year and a half older than her, was not even, she wasn't even there.
It's incredible.
So yeah, it really is. I think that early intervention definitely has I don't see anything that wouldn't suggest that I promote it to parents and whatnot. So highly
Yeah.
recommend.
I even had a family that there were multiple siblings in the home that had disabilities, and I see that it's very, very, very often that I see that actually. Um, and the parents decided that they just wanted to get one of the other siblings evaluated just because they weren't sure. And this child ended up testing, above average for everything. And they
Mhm.
didn't need intervention. But I thought that was so wise. And, I I probably, in my experience, probably wouldn't have. But after hearing their story and their situation, I was thinking, wow, that's really wise because not everyone can be an expert in every discipline. And
Yeah.
just to get someone to look at your child from all different types of angles, you're better off addressing it earlier on than waiting. I think a lot of parents have anxiety about this process, especially when you've never been through it before. Um, and you don't want to feel anxious. You don't, if you can help it, I'm sure you're probably going to feel all kinds of emotions, but there really is a sense of urgency to meet our children's needs. And I think a large part of that begins in that early intervention phase. Um, and it's, like I said, it's really going to trickle into their school years. So,
Mhm.
highly recommend it. It's never going to harm your child learning a little bit more about them and what their needs may or may not be.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely, couldn't agree more. I mean, that's really what I can relate to that on a parental level. Um, and it's really been interesting to see the process of early intervention pan out between both the professional side and also the parental side because I, I was working full time when Grayson was evaluated and diagnosed. Um, so yeah, it's very interesting. Um, and I know that I had mentioned that the CDC guidelines had changed, and I know a lot of parents are probably on the fence about uh, autism and the taboo of it right now because of everything that has been going on with the current administration in the White House and the a lot of the studies that have been released about Tylenol and the link between that and autism. And, people don't really know what to believe at this time and what to really correlate between autism and why and how and what it is. And, there's so many uncertainties.
Yeah.
And I think that also is really scary. Scary for the parents, scary for people. I mean, I'm sure it's scary for doctors too. Not really knowing exactly what to tell people when they come in and ask questions, because there is just so much misinformation and, information about things that just it really hasn't been studied fully or accurately. Um, Not saying that maybe some of those things that have been released don't have some possible truth to it, but I'm not going to say. I have no idea. I'm not a doctor. So um, I think that could definitely sway some parents away from kind of pushing themselves to get evaluations. Um, so yeah, I definitely think that there are many barriers that could be in the way of parents going for those services that are out there and available for them and their families.
Sure. And I work with a variety of families, very culturally diverse. Um, many families that have generational family members living in the home. Um, One parent has different views than the other, and I think that the pressures come from within families, from outside of families. I think it's the pressure, it sometimes seems unbearable from what families share with me. I think there's a level of guilt that some families have. Did I do this to my child? Um, just so many questions, so many unanswered things. And for me, I'm a person that I hate the unknown. So I can only imagine how it would feel applying this to my own child's story and not really knowing what to do, where to go from here. Did I cause this? What could I have done differently? And I think dealing with all of those thoughts, all those emotions, all those feelings, I think that needs to happen in some fashion outside of, this path for what to do for your child. I think to also make sure that as parents, as siblings, as relatives, loved ones, that you're still getting your needs met. If you need to see a counselor, a therapist, um, to really talk through those emotions, that grief that you might feel. I think that's really important. And I don't know if we were necessarily planning on discussing that today, but I think that really is part of the path. I'm not saying that's everyone's path or the next step that they'll take or even a part of their journey. But I definitely want to encourage if that's something that you're dealing with as a relative or a loved one of a child that has a special need, definitely don't hesitate making sure your needs are met as well. Because, it's kind of like I think about the flight thing when we go on the airplane, so they say first put your oxygen mask on first before you can really support your minor children and those around you. And I'm not saying that I understand the life that you might live, Kate, that you do live, Kate, or the life that others might live. Um, but it kind of makes me think of that. It's going to be very hard for you to have the stamina meet your child's needs if you're not meeting your own. So,
Mhm.
kind of a little segue. I just really want to encourage families to know that that is an important part of the journey.
Yeah. And you're right. In our personal journey, that has been a huge, it's been a huge barrier. Um, we often don't talk about it, but my husband and I, we get probably about 3 to 5 hours of sleep a night, and I try to nap throughout the day if I can, but I do work, and it's really unrealistic at times. And I think that that's also why maybe my immune system is not the best, because I don't get the rest that I need. Um, but on the other hand, I'm always willing to, I mean, I would stay up constantly if I had to, if it was best for my child. So, um, but yeah, and I think your comment about like the therapy and all of that thing, all of what you were saying there, that I think is huge for parents. I think parents often are very so focused on their child that they don't focus on themselves. And, there's a therapy that is really great right now. It's ACT therapy, acceptance commitment therapy. So I've been participating in ACT therapy for the past almost 2 years now. And it has really helped my view on our situation and our family and how I viewed things. And, I'm accepting the things that I can't change. I'm committing to what we are doing, and we just take one day at a time. And that's really what we've focused on for the past year, especially. But I don't think that that is available. uh, It's not available to many parents. And I think that that is one of the things, support in general for parents is not readily available. I don't think that there are enough resources out there. I don't think that there are enough like support groups, therapists that specialize in these things. Um, I mean, I'm a firm believer that like marriage counseling for parents that are together that have a child with autism or any really, disability of any sort, I think is huge. I think I heard that recently 80% of families or parents that have a kid with autism end up getting divorced. And
Wow.
that
I
is
last I heard it
insane.
was 50. So it must
Mm,
have increased.
yeah, I heard 80 recently. And that just it blows my mind because
Yeah.
um I can't fathom uh how many people just, I mean, you marry somebody because you love them, and then you start a family with them, and then you you know the family breaks up because of one reason or another. But um it's really sad to see. And so I think that marital counseling would be wonderful, um if they offered something like that. If you have a child with a disability, it's a lot to handle. It's a lot of blame that people put on themselves and or their partner. Um, and it's a lot to cope with. You're right. I mean, there's definite stages that you have to get through, grief, anger, frustration. There's like a whole spectrum basically of emotions that you're going to go through. So it really is important that these resources become available because there really are just not enough out there for parents. And the parents, I mean, if your cup is half full, you're not going to be able to feed your kids and give all of yourself to them. So it really just, it's really unfortunate.
That's really great advice. I actually never never heard that for, the recommendation of marriage counseling for families that couples that have children with special needs. I think that's really wise. I never even thought about that. I mean, I I couldn't count on my hands. I couldn't count on my toes, and how many families that I've seen that are separated. And I know my mom, she was a single mom, raised me as a single mom. She worked a lot. Fortunately, my family's wonderful, and my aunts and uncles all stepped up to help, and that was hard. And I was a neurotypically developing child. I cannot fathom having to navigate all of the extra appointments and so forth, um, as a single parent. I mean, I'm married, I have children, and life is hard. I can't imagine the weight
Mhm.
of those extra things. So, very wise advice. I think that's really great advice. Um, yeah. So, getting into some more of the next steps. So I know we talked a bit about early intervention, and we talked about getting that diagnosis. Now, there's a difference between those two things. So you have the educational evaluations, then you have the medical evaluations. Do you want to share a little bit about your experience and how that kind of process went for you with Grayson and maybe even Rosalind?
Yeah. So at least for what we've seen through the educational system and for his medical, or at least for both kids, their medical side of things, um, we we needed to get medical assistance for both of our children because of the medications that they needed to be on. Grayson's seizure medications would have cost us thousands of dollars out of pocket. So that just was not realistic. And the ABA services that we got for both kids would have been unrealistic and just not possible if we wouldn't have had medical assistance. So, in order to get that, you do need to have a medical diagnosis. And so, that's probably the most important. Yeah, you can take your early intervention evaluation to your local county assistance office, but they are going to tell you that they want to see a medical diagnosis. So the best place to begin with that is, I mean, it depends on what your insurance is. If you have a private insurance for your child, uh, I'm calling the member services number on the back of your card, calling and asking, where can I get my child evaluated for autism, or, where can I have a psychological eval done for my child by a medical doctor or a PsyD. Um, that probably was, it was easy for me because I worked at an office that provided that. So I didn't have a problem getting in to see a doctor. And I was very, very fortunate to be in that position to be able to get both of my children in for evaluations. Um, I did have to wait for appointments just like everybody else did, despite being the intake specialist at the time. So I saw how hard the process was to wait, and the process that we went through for both children was very thorough. It was a multidisciplinary evaluation, and both children had testing. I mean, Rosalind did ADOS testing. Grayson, they tried to do neuropsych testing, and it just was not happening. So yeah, I mean, we did the whole array of things, and we received our medical diagnosis. Rosalind's was signed by a medical doctor and a PsyD. Grayson's was also signed by both and neuropsych. So Um, that was obtaining that wasn't difficult for me, but I also knew where to go and how to obtain what I needed. But if parents don't know, I would suggest starting with insurance companies, starting with that number on the back of the member services card, or your insurance card, that member services number, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. But you do want to find somewhere that will be able to provide the psychological evaluation or psychiatric eval and testing such as like an ADOS test or an ADIR, something like that.
Yeah. So
Does
they're
your company,
definitely good. I'm
sorry,
sorry.
does your company provide any sort of evaluations or do they just do the services?
No, no. So we don't have a psychologist on board. I know of quite a few doctors that write some really phenomenal evaluations. I have a
Mm,
favorite that I will refer to if the family is able to fund for it privately, which is not super often, but sometimes families feel, okay, once I get this diagnosis, then, you know, the diagnosis that we're assuming we're going to get, and if it's not, whatever diagnosis is beneficial for my child's future, um, it's worth it for them to put those funds out, that one time evaluation, fee, which can be a pretty penny, to then get the services funded through insurance. But to make it clear, these evaluations can really happen around the same time. It's not one needs to come before the other. I think early intervention evaluations, I would urge really shoot for that first
mhm,
if you don't have the bandwidth to do all. Um, but there is gonna be a little bit of waiting. So I would say pick up the phone, schedule one, pick up the phone, schedule the other. It's not that easy. I know it's many
mhm.
more steps than that, but um they can coexist, and you're these children can receive educational services at the same time they're receiving medical services. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's things that can definitely be put on the back burner. There's things that are more priority, and I would say those are definitely your priority steps. Um, I'm not sure how it works necessarily in Pennsylvania, but I know in Maryland, it is highly recommended that once you get that autism diagnosis, to get on that autism waiver as soon as possible. I believe the way the wait list works is different from Maryland to Pennsylvania. It's very linear in Maryland, where it's gonna your first come first serve. Um, there are other conditions that you must meet once your name pops up on the waiver, but it's not based on needs per se. Isn't it a little bit different in Pennsylvania?
It's very different in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And I wish I could go into the full details of it. It's very messy in Pennsylvania. Just to give perspective, we do have like the autism waiver, but typically they don't start that until a child is like 14. So they really focus mainly on early intervention, does like the whole, taxpayer money, and then a child typically will get like medical assistance, and that kind of pays for everything up until a certain point. Um, Now, for us in particular, Grayson has a waiver, but his waivers are through the intellectual disability unit portion of Lancaster County, where we
Okay.
are. And that's because he has the ID diagnosis that accompanies his autism.
Okay.
So
So it's very different.
yeah, they're different. There's different like avenues and there's different routes and um, many different waivers. But I can say I know that at 18, that's typically when the autism waivers, the adult autism waivers kick in for individuals. If I've been told that if you get a waiver before the age of 16 or 18, you're typically very, very, very lucky. Um, we are lucky because I am just a squeaky wheel and I will squeak until somebody gives me what I need. So we
But you
were
got to do
very, very
sometimes.
fortunate. Yeah,
It's what you have
yeah,
to do.
yeah. And I do encourage every single parent, be that squeaky wheel, because they have the funding. They just want to keep the funding as long as possible so that it looks impressive to the higher ups. But they have the funding, so make them use it.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that it is, I think I would say you could say Maryland's a little bit messy too. I would say that the waiver isn't meeting the needs of the children early on.
Hmm.
From what I'm hearing, it's about 11 that children get contacted to, like 11 years basically, that children get alerted that they've come up on the wait list. And if families don't get their child on that waiver right away, then it's going to be past age 11.
Hmm.
Um, DDA, which is the basically for the adult, you kick in with a lot more state funded waivers and funding, and it's not just specific to autism. That can kick in anywhere between like 14 to 21. Um, and the autism waiver is supposed to cover until age 21.
Hmm.
Um, so there's a couple of different things going on here. And I wouldn't say that it's necessarily meeting the needs of our children. And I certainly wouldn't say that our adults have their needs met, which is a big need for more development there. Um, I think getting on that list for the waiver is something I'd recommend
Hmm.
doing earlier on. But I would say that really getting that early intervention and ABA therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy really is going to be where you're going to see your greatest amount of growth for your child. The waiver provides a lot of other services that you wouldn't get from those services. So there's like respite, for parents to be able to take that nap that they needed. For mom and dad to be able to go out on a date night. I mean, those services, they have a place, they have a value. Um, I see you smiling right now because you're probably like,
I
wow, that'd
only
be
I only
really
laugh because we were on a respite wait list for 8 years.
nice.
Um, and when we were finally pulled off, we had a really bad experience with a provider. Um,
Oh,
and right now we are finally, knock on wood, um, arranged to have an in-home and community service worker. So that it's called IH or ICHS here in Pennsylvania. Um, and she actually is a former staff of our ABA company
okay.
who has been cleared. It's cleared through the BACB, whatever that is. And she's going to be working with Grayson as his worker for about 20 hours a
Great.
week.
Oh,
And she will be able to provide a lot of care for him. She was actually his BCBA for about 4 years.
wow.
So she's going to be able to help us out with him for 20 hours a week and
Wow.
take him places. And he absolutely adores her.
Oh,
And she knows him so well.
that
And
sounds like
we
a
are
dream.
very, very grateful. It really is. And honestly, we have waited, it's almost 9 years now, and we have waited. But it's worth it. Waiting is worth it if you push for it. So,
Yeah. That's the issue with these waivers and the grants and through the state is that these services exist, not timely,
mhm.
but the barrier is that the staffing isn't there.
Yep.
It's tough. I used to service some families through the waiver, autism and the DDA, and um, I definitely would say not to toot my own horn, I would say I was one of the exceptions. The longevity of how much time I supported these individuals and um I'm a part of like a Facebook group for services in Maryland and I just see these families trying to get staff, trying to keep their staff. The hourly wages are decreasing
Yeah.
and staff don't want to stay on for that.
Mhm.
And um, so there's definitely some issues for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I
And
wouldn't
it's
say
not just that field too. It's nursing, in-home nursing too, because Grayson also has that for school. And
okay.
we have technically we have 24/7 hour nursing approved for him, but we only utilize like 35 of those hours because there is just no staff available for him.
So he gets that in school?
Yeah, so he has a nurse who goes to school with him. She rides the bus, goes to school with him, and then she typically will ride in the car with us when we go to the autism center. And she comes to appointments with me and him if I'm going by myself, like if my husband can't come along, which
Mhm.
is majority of the time. Um, and I mean, she is essential to his care, and she's been with us for 3 years, and she is absolutely part of our family now. Like she's just wonderful. We love her so much, and she has done so much. She treats Grayson like her own child, and it's wonderful. But um, if we did not have her, I really don't know. We probably would not have a nurse because there just are no nurses available.
Yeah. And it's great that you have her, but you're saying you're supposed to have her for 24 hours? Did you say
We
that? Or
do, yeah, we have approval for a nurse for 24/7. Mhm.
yeah. So, I mean, that's wonderful and all, but
Yeah,
you know, that's
it's only
probably why
good
you're
if
not.
you, yeah. Well, yeah, that's definitely, yeah, because we've had a nurse for overnight like 3 times, and my husband and I have been able to sleep through the night for like 7 hours, and it's been amazing. But yeah, when you don't have that, I mean, I'm used to running on like 3 to 5 hours of sleep, so um, we just kind of deal with it. But yeah, so
I
yeah,
know
I
that
mean,
from the
definitely,
newborn phase, but I don't.
yeah, it's like having a newborn constantly.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's definitely not ideal, but you know, your brain and your body get used to it. It's not fun, but we do what we have to do, especially, parents who love their children, and we deal with it to do what's best for them. So um yeah, but I mean, we could go on forever talking about what is needed and where the deficits are in treatment and services, and the funding cuts, and the lack of pay, lack of staffing, the lack of available services out there. I mean, I could go on for hours. And I'm sure you probably could too. And I mean, we could do a whole episode just based off of that. Um, but unfortunately, we want to stick more to like some of the positives and be helpful, and
Yeah,
um, yeah, so it's
because there is realistic help out there. I mean, I think
mhm,
that wait lists are a thing, but there is realistic help and it's you know, how to find it. And I think by kind of taking our recommendations, looking into the early intervention and getting that medical diagnosis and um, making sure your needs are being met. I think in general, just know that you have permission to breathe. You have permission to take each day by day, and um, you're not going to know everything. You're not going to go from point A to point C. And we just want to give you those beginning steps that just give you a little taste of the beginning, um, what to do, empower you um, for those initial steps because there is help and there are resources, some greater than others. Those are great first steps.
yeah, definitely. I fully agree. All right, well, that's all we have for today's episode. Thanks so much for joining us. Next time we meet, we will be
in studio filming, so you'll be able to see us. And we will be bringing on a very special guest.
We're looking forward to seeing you. We hope that you will tune in to our next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Sip and stim. Sip and stim.